This is one of the newest units that Southwestern Bell Telephone Company in Tarrant County has in order to be of better service to its customers. It's called a TSPS unit, and this really means Traffic Service Position System Unit. Now, for all us novices, it had to be explained that this is an Expanded Direct Distance Dialing Unit, or EDDD. At midnight last night, the following exchanges were able to now use these capabilities. These exchanges are 274, 275, 277, 265, 451, 457, 473, 477, and 531. Now here's how it works. On your telephone, you simply dial 0, the area code, and the number that you wish to dial. The call is then routed through this board, and an operator such as Carol Houston here will stay with you until the call is completed, until you no longer need her assistance. The entire Fort Worth metropolitan area should be cut over to this system by May of 1971. We've come a long way from the old cord-type telephone console panels when you used to have to crank a telephone handle on the side, and an operator would come in and say, "Hello, Central. May I have your number, please?" Jerry Park, Channel 8 News on the Move, Fort Worth.
In late January or early February, about 3 or 4 weeks from now.
What's been the initial response from your fellow councilmen on this proposal?
I have talked to many of them. Of course, all of them take the position that they are certainly as much against the emission of lead into the atmosphere as I am, and I'm sure they are. So I would hope that we could adopt our ordinance without any great difficulty.
Well, in retrospect, from about a year ago, it's at least 100% change, because a year ago I wasn't doing it for a full-time job. I started just this summer taking it, even the attitude, seriously, but now I take the physical training. Everything is my life, boxing, and believe it or not, I'm beginning to enjoy it.
Doug Lord's done a lot for you, hasn't he?
Yeah, Doug and I have moved together, and he does a good job in selecting opponents, and he keeps tab on the financial arrangements too, and it keeps a real good job for me. It really does.
How are you going to open up against Earls tomorrow night? Will you feel him out for a few rounds, or will he do the same to you?
Well, like I said, I don't study his style. I don't know whether he comes out swinging at me, and I don't really care. I'll just fight as hard as I can, and if he enjoys fighting as much as I do, then he's going to have a ball out there Monday night.
Well, immediately, which means as soon as the legislature goes into session, we've got to provide between $40 and $45 million in emergency appropriations simply to pay the bills that have piled up during the past year.
Then you have to, that only gets you up to the $80 million limit that's in the Constitution.
That's right.
And this means another crisis, doesn't it?
That's right. We've got to pass very early in the session a raise in the constitutional limit for welfare. If we don't, the welfare checks will be cut by approximately a third. And as you may know, the welfare recipients are now only receiving 75% of what their real budgeted needs are. Now, I would like to point out that welfare in Texas is not like welfare in New York City or Los Angeles or Chicago. The only people that get welfare in Texas are the old, the crippled, the blind, or the children without any support. So if we have to cut welfare by 30%, that will mean that all of the old age pensioners all over the state that are presently living on $60 or $65 a month, which you and I spend more than that for gasoline, it means that their checks will be cut to $40 a month, and I simply believe that many of them will be very hungry. And we found some inefficiencies in some areas that should be reformed. For instance, we found that our average welfare worker is spending 35 hours a week filling out forms when they ought to be out talking to their clients and trying to help people get off welfare. So I think that we need a lot more electronic data processing. I think the whole system needs to be upgraded. I think that in the areas of changes, of basic structural changes, that it's very important that we establish for illegitimate children that the fathers of illegitimate children have got to pay child support. Texas is one of the 3 states in the country that does not do that. That will reduce our welfare costs.
This requires garnishment of wages?
In practical matters, it would require garnishment. Now, presently, we do not require, even legally, we do not require that fathers of illegitimate children pay child support, even if they would pay it. So we've got to pass laws that we can do that. And then we've got to, in my opinion, garnish wages of fathers, both legitimate and illegitimate, that refuse to pay the child support that they've been legally judged liable for in the courts.
Here in Texas, we're going to need some $250 to $300 million new dollars to operate our health service program, Medicaid, Medicare program in Texas. Well, this has more than tripled just in 2 years' time. And this is something that Texas can do absolutely nothing about. This is a program that is fully under the scope and authority of the Secretary of Welfare.
I think there is a great deal of merit behind the comments that have been advanced by both the governor and the lieutenant governor. And they are to the effect that the federal government should actually take over the welfare program. And their reasoning stem from this unique fact, in that our guidelines have been advanced by either federal law or administrative order of the federal government, but yet our participation has been enlarged at the state level.
Well, when the federal government removed the guidelines that we had here in Texas, the welfare recipients have increased approximately 9,700 new ones per month. And we keep thinking that perhaps this will reduce itself, but it just seemingly is staying around the 10,000 figure.
Isn't this going to cause a revolt among the citizens? Have you heard anyone say that they want to continue this, or are they tired of it?
No, the people, the taxpayers, I can say this, the communications we get from the taxpayers indicate that they are just about fed up with the welfare program.
But the people that refuse to work, quite frankly, I don't think that we owe these people a living, and I don't think that we should have a system that complements people who do not want to work for a living. But yet there are the blind, the physically and mentally handicapped, the old age people who cannot take care of themselves. And I feel that this is a responsibility of government to provide a decent standard of living for these people.
And they actually make up the largest portion of the welfare budget, don't they?
Yes, they do. The people who really need some type of health care or some type of financial assistance to maintain a decent standard of living. These people probably make up 90% of the people who are on so-called welfare in this state. But we're going to have to completely reorganize the program, and we're going to have to understand it. And I think those of us at the state level, and particularly those at the federal level, the greatest sin we have committed is the fact that we went about writing welfare legislation without understanding what we were doing.
Well, by and large, I very definitely think there must be room for improvement in this area. I do think that we're going to have a problem selling the idea of a constitutional amendment on welfare without a ceiling in the state of Texas. And this is a big concern to me at this time. There's reports and rumors that the Senate's going to pass a constitutional amendment without a ceiling being placed on welfare expenditures. And this is going to be rather difficult to do in the House.
Elderly persons in Haltom City, as well as throughout the nation, as far as I'm concerned, are the ones that need some relief. They're not eligible for welfare or unemployment or anything along this line that your state and federal governments have taken steps to correct. So I feel like that someone needs to offer these people some relief so that their dollars can go a little bit further. Perhaps this will be a beginning point, and it will give them less burdens on to come from their fixed incomes.
It's a proposal to phase out lead in gasoline, similar to the ordinance that was adopted by the city of Buffalo, New York. We had a copy of that ordinance. It's been submitted to our city attorney, Alex Bickley, with a request that he will draft a similar proposal after researching the federal law that passed maybe 2 weeks ago and signed into law to see whether or not the city and the state are preempted from legislating in this area. Assuming that we are not, he will give me the ordinance tomorrow. I'll distribute it to the other council members. Then I'll introduce a resolution to set a public hearing date.
No, I don't think so. I think it's one of communications, Jerry. We're quite aware of the feeling, I guess, is the proper terminology that prevails around the country, particularly in people's thinking toward Vietnam. But I think our major problem is one of presenting West Point as it really is.
Do you go after an athlete and then say, young man, how would you like to go to West Point? Or are you informed as to who's coming to West Point and then try to get your athletes from there?
Well, we hear about a lot of young prospects through their success in high school, and we are naturally attracted to them. Then the first thing we must do is check out their academic status to see if they can get in, and then encourage them toward the opportunities that prevail at West Point.
Is it a difficult 4 years of student life in that studying hard and not having many hours to yourself would be considered difficult?
Well, I think the effort that is required during the 4 years as cadets at West Point is more than compensated for by the opportunities to prevail after West Point. And it's like everything else in life that we face, the good things come with a little effort.
2 vacancies on the Tarrant County Water Control and Improvement District's Board of Directors will be filled in a county-wide election tomorrow. The 5 directors are charged with the responsibility of providing an adequate water supply for commercial and private consumers in Tarrant County. The district supervises 3 major reservoirs and owns the water in another. The reservoirs stretch from Lake Bridgeport on the north to the newly completed Cedar Creek Reservoir on the south. A major project to be supervised over the next 3 years is a 76-mile-long pipeline which will run from Fort Worth to Cedar Creek Reservoir. Water Board Administrative Assistant Chuck Whalen describes the status of that $35.5 million project.
Well, of course, the project has been in the planning stages for some time now. The first increment contract has been awarded. This will be the first of 5 separate contracts which will complete the project. I think what we're probably most interested in is our timing here on the completion date. We are presently contemplating completion of the project in late summer of 1973.
There are 17 candidates for the 2 vacancies on the board. Voters in Tarrant County will cast votes in some 21 different polling places tomorrow. The results should be final by about 9 o'clock tomorrow night. Art Sinclair, Channel 8 News on the Move, Fort Worth.
When press day arrives, you can count on it. The quarterback is surrounded by adulators, the split receivers and the defensive backs, the linebackers, the running backs particularly, all the focal point of much, much attention. But what about the poor offensive center? For the Cowboys, that man is number 51, Dave Manders. Dave, I look around, there must be at least 25 to 30 television stations and a couple of hundred reporters, and the offensive centers are being ignored again. It's not fair, is it?
Not by Channel 8. Here we are.
I appreciate the plug. Do you ever get used to the anonymity of being down in the middle of that pile?
No, you get kind of lazy, really. Nobody has their eye on you particularly, and it works out okay. I don't mind.
You know, you've had a tremendous career with the Cowboys, and can you recall has there been any specific instance when you did generate a lot of publicity for the name of Dave Manders?
No, I don't believe so, Vern.
Only on the rare occasions when the center goes over the punter's head, huh?
I'll take it back. We had one score that was 31-2 against the Giants back in '65, and the 2 points was caused by the center going over Don's head. So I guess at one time I did get quite a bit of publicity.
Dave, obviously, though, you are an integral part of the Cowboy offensive line, which Coach Landry now refers to as the best they've ever had in Dallas. And it's an amazing thing because of the fluctuation you've had in the line. Don't you think?
Yes, it is. We have only 2 people in their original positions, John Nyland and, Ralph isn't even in his original position. He's at tackle, but it's the other tackle. And I think what it just shows that we have some fine coaching. We're taught the basics as rookies, our second and third years, and once you learn the basics, you can fit anywhere into our offensive system in the offensive line. And I think it's a great tribute, such as last week, for John Nyland pulled up lame with a Charlie horse in his leg, and a play was called from the sideline, came in, and it meant that John had a pull and trap on that particular play. We just switched in the huddle. Blaine went to John's place, and John went over to Blaine's place and ran the play from there and picked up about 8 yards. So it's a real good feeling. It's a feeling of confidence when you know you have this experience and versatility in the line.
I would suppose, Dave, that things will not change for Baltimore, that you would go with what has brung you, as Darrell Royal might say.
Yes, and I don't think Baltimore is going to change for us, and they're looking extremely well defensively. Defensive front four is very strong and aggressive. Personally, I have Mike Curtis to block the middle linebacker, and he has to rate one of the top 2 or 3 in the league as far as middle linebackers.
It goes without saying, but best of luck to you.
Thank you, Vern. Thank you. And thank you, Channel 8.
Mandy will be there 6 days from today, in the center of the line, wearing his number 51, blocking on Mike Curtis. Look for him. He might appreciate it. This is Vern Lundquist, Channel 8 Sports, with the Cowboys in Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
The extreme militancy has helped to bring the issue to the forefront because unfortunately our society as it exists today demands that we've got to cry out loud and do something violent in order to attract attention. But on the other hand, if we're ever to get any kind of serious concessions on this question, or what I indicated was the larger question of the tie-in with peace in the Middle East from the Soviet Union, we will not do it by harming their property or causing any sort of violence to their diplomats. On the contrary, it only increases a hardening of the Soviet position, which is already, quite firm as it is, and more so, it gives them an excuse now to embarrass the American government, which is exactly what they're doing at the present time with the harassment against journalists, diplomats, and others in Moscow.
There are 3 areas in the nation where helicopter training is being conducted. Primary training at Fort Walters near Mineral Wells, and advanced training at Fort Rucker, Alabama, and the Hunter Stewart Complex in Georgia. One or more of those is in danger of losing the helicopter training schools. Congressman Jim Wright said today that in his estimation, Fort Walters is the least logical choice to lose the training.
As between the 3 military helicopter training bases that we have, the year-round flying weather at Fort Walters is far better than at either of the others. The expansion capability of the facility we have at Fort Walters is much better. We could expand it if necessary in the case of a national emergency and could not expand the others. The community relations that have been enjoyed by the military personnel who come and live there is superb. Without exception, that it's as fine a place as they've ever lived. These are intangible things in one sense, but as I've tried to explain to the Secretary of the Army, they're very real assets and very substantial advantages to the Army. I will be in touch with Secretary Laird next week on this very subject, and I'm very hopeful, in fact determined, that to the extent of my ability, we'll be keeping it open.
Loss of the training facilities could easily mean the closing of the base, but that won't be anything new. It was open for 3 years during World War II as an infantry replacement center. Closed after the war, it reopened in the early 1950s. Fort Walters' future right now is in doubt, and its fate lies in the classified corridors of the Pentagon. Jerry Park, Channel 8 News on the Move, Fort Worth.